name's Phillipe. I'm a philosopher, and I'm interested in what architecture can tell us about our lifestyles. I'll take you to explore some of the most remarkable habitats on the planet in order to discover their meaning and to share their riches. Located in the heart of industrial Lombardy, in northern Italy, Milan is one of the most polluted cities in Europe. It's also one of the least green, with only 4% of parks and gardens. A derisory percentage when you consider the ecological challenges Italy is facing today. To curb this problem, Milan has decided to reintroduce nature into the city, and in a rather spectacular way. A few kilometers away from the city center, next to a vast field of wheat of 5,000 square meters, planted in the city like an island of greenery, stand two vegetal towers, similar to the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. This is the Bosco Verticale, a project designed by architect Stefano Boeri and inaugurated in 2014 in the Porta Nuova district. Whereas 90% of towers are covered in metal and glass, this was the first time vegetation material was used for architectural purposes in high-rise buildings. Imagine no fewer than 800 trees, 4,500 bushes, and 15,000 plants spread over 400 terraces, the equivalent of 2 hectares of forest, only vertical. Genuine green lungs in the heart of the metropolis, the Bosco Verticale is a large-scale experiment in eco-landscaping architecture which integrates biodiversity into the building. A technological and ecological feat that's unique in the world. How were these skyscrapers, a blend of habitat and nature, constructed? And how do they work? What do the apartments look like? And what is it like behind this green curtain? Hello, Simona.
Hello, Philippe. How are you?
Good, thanks for seeing me.
I'm delighted to welcome you here in the most beautiful skyscraper in the world. It was given this title in 2014 by the jury of a very prestigious prize. Come, I'll show you around. We'll go up to the 14th floor out of 26. There are 26 floors altogether.
Okay, let's go. Simona Pizzi, one of the first residents here, has offered to show me her apartment.
This is my son, Andrea.
Hello.
Hello, Andrea. Nice to meet you.
Same here.
He's the boy of the house.
Yes.
Wow.
Welcome to our home.
I'm surprised at how bright it is, because when you see all those trees from the outside, you'd think it would be darker inside.
It's bright because the trees are planted on the outside of the terrace, and they grow laterally. So there's a big open space in front.
What made you want to live here? The building itself or the Bosco Verticale project in general?
We like the idea of having trees at home, while also living in an ultra-technological environment, in a city as dynamic and fast-paced as Milan, but with greenery on our terraces.
interesting thing.
This one piece will make 52 layers.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen, all for free. No subscription required.
Here's the terrace where we have lunch.
And breakfast.
Right. There are lots of flowers. White ones, yellow ones.
It's gorgeous. There are lots of different species of trees and plants.
There are lots of other species on the other terrace, too.
Oh yes, they've all got the same. Every terrace has different plants.
Yes, they're different plants.
That's awesome.
Look how big this tree is.
Amazing. It's pretty high up. Don't you get vertigo?
No, not at all.
It's funny because there's a lot of talk about these towers. Some people say they're not very human places to live in, notably because of the height. But when you're up here, surrounded by all this greenery, it makes the environment very human.
It's true that when you're out on the terrace, you feel very safe, even though you're high up, because the greenery gives the impression that you're at ground level. And we live alongside our neighbors in a totally normal, natural way. Let me show you the other side.
Oh right, the trees we see here are growing on the floor below.
Yes, it's not our terrace, but it feels like it, because the trees grow up to here, and we can also see them. This is our bedroom. And here there's another terrace.
Oh yes? Really?
Looking onto the other tower, which is smaller.
Oh yes, there are terraces everywhere.
Yes.
It's marvelous. With a sofa to sit on.
Everything has blossomed right now, so it's very beautiful. Plus, there's a view on the other tower. The first thing I do every morning is open the window and contemplate the vegetation to see how it changes from season to season. Can you feel the breeze? Other than the northern-facing terrace, there are lots of angles, and you can smell the fresh air. Whereas most skyscrapers have air conditioners, which isn't very natural. Here, you feel like you're living in the open air.
In the Bosco, each inhabitant has 2 trees, 8 bushes, and 20 plants selected from 100 different species. It was the agronomist, landscapist Laura Gatti who planted and grew all of the greenery that make up the Bosco Verticale. This specialist on inner-city nature has been working on urban revitalization and the development of green spaces for over 20 years. Without her, this incredible project would never have seen the light of day. Bosco Verticale is an architectural and landscaping feat that's unique in the world because it was the first time living trees were used on a high-rise's facade. Don't you have to be a bit nuts to start a project like that?
Nuts? No. We simply stretched the limits that had been used in other projects. But this was a very interesting multidisciplinary project, which lasted 3 years, during which technicians, engineers, and installers all put their work at the service of the trees, and that required a lot of studies and research. For example, one fundamental piece of data came to us at the start of the project from a wind tunnel test at the Polytechnic School of Milan. It indicated the places where it was possible to plant trees. And it also gave very positive results, because it also made us realize how trees would attract breezes that would flow around the buildings.
You tested the tree's wind resistance, but I guess there were other criteria, like sunlight, and regulating the growth of the trees, which mustn't grow too tall or they'd weaken the tower's structure.
The main criterion concerned the adaptability to the overall conditions, to growth, and to growing in pots and boxes. What's more, we had to respect the original idea of the architect, Stefano Bori, who envisioned more of a wood than a traditional garden or a neighborhood park. So we chose trees that looked as natural as possible. Then we chose where to plant them according to their height and exposure. The facades of both towers are oriented to the 4 cardinal points: north, east, south, and west, so they benefit from very precise sunlight. This is the north facade. On the north facade, there are plants which, in nature, live in the shelter of other plants. Whereas on the south facade, we planted more typically Mediterranean species, such as holm oaks and olive trees.
Wow.
In recent years, we've seen more and more vegetal walls appearing in architecture. But here, in Bosco Verticale, you've gone much further because you're using trees. Does that have a truly different ecological impact?
The facade of Bosco Verticale is made up of 12,000 square meters of greenery, but it's very dense, very developed. Trees have lots of leaves, so they can absorb a lot more pollutants and fine particles than plants you'd usually find on terraces.
So the towers play an ecological function in the neighborhood in terms of biodiversity.
Right from the beginning, the system was designed to be a home for all forms of life. Bipeds, or humans, of course, but also useful insects, like bees and butterflies, and birds. And from that point of view, the result has gone way beyond our expectations. Nature is fundamental to inner city life. We know we can do it, and we must continue in this vein. We have no other choice but to continue along these lines in the future.
At Bosco Verticale, the greenery is solely tended by the estate management. The sprinkler system is automatic, but the regular maintenance of this vertical forest isn't easy because pruning has to be done on the very facades of the towers. Specialist arborists with a profound knowledge of the trees and plants of the Bosco Verticale have had to learn how to abseil from the top of the 2 towers, which are 76 and 112 meters high respectively. A task as spectacular as it is dangerous, carried out twice a year. The inhabitants aren't allowed to water the plants or prune the trees, or to introduce new species so as to not interfere with the ecosystem of the towers. The trees of Bosco Verticale were grown for 2 years in a nursery before being hoisted up by cranes to the terraces, then planted in large boxes that can contain up to 5 cubic meters of earth. The complexity behind this engineering is fascinating. There's a perfect blend of vegetation and construction materials. as if the towers were acting as a fulcrum between nature and architecture. René, as an arborist, is it different working on a tower like this one?
This is a really exceptional situation. I think it's the first time in the world, certainly in Italy, that an arborist has to work like this, abseiling down 2 ropes. But it's really interesting and stimulating work. Actually, I was born and raised in this district, but it was totally different back then. It was a working-class neighborhood. I hadn't lived in Milan for 25 years, but I recently moved back here and found that my old district had completely changed. It was working-class, poor, run-down, and I discovered an ultra-modern district with high-rise buildings, and especially these 2 towers, the Bosco Verticale.
Were there green spaces like this?
No, there was wasteland, but no green spaces.
This is the reintroduction of nature into the city.
Yes, vertically, but yes. Okay, my life's in your hands.
Okay, I'm letting you go.
No, just give me some slack. Look at her. She wanted to drop me.
All this technology in the service of the biodiversity impresses me, but it also leaves me slightly perplexed. How do you make people more aware and teach them about good urban green practices when nature isn't in the hands of the inhabitants, like at the towers? When green spaces are scarce, it's by growing plants on our balconies or by gardening on our terraces that we get back in touch with the vegetal world. These ordinary practices not only meet our need for nature, they also teach us to take greater care for it. Not everyone agrees about the towers. They were built on land that was often frequented by the people of Isola, a working-class district close to Porta Nuova. The opponents of the Bosco Verticale criticize its exorbitant construction costs. To them, these luxury high-rises symbolize the privatization of nature reserved for wealthy homeowners. Bert Thijs, the founder of Isola Pepi Verde, a collective of artists and activists, believes the reintroduction of nature into urban areas should take a different form. Bert, hi.
Hi, how are you doing?
Great, thanks. It's amazing here in the Isola district. We're not far from the towers, but you get the feeling of being in a completely different world.
That's a completely natural feeling because this is the precise point where 2 worlds meet. One is an old industrial district, which was full of workers, craftsmen, and even criminals. It's the district of Isola. The other world is the new district of Porta Nuova, part of which was constructed in Isola and the other part in other districts. And this tension has generated contradictions in this neighborhood that is in full transformation.
Yes, but the Bosco Verticale has brought the equivalent of a hectare of forest into the city.
It hasn't brought the forest into the neighborhood, though, because no one can go mushroom collecting in the Bosco Verticale. It's totally inaccessible. All that vegetation is for the privileged few, those with enough money to buy an apartment here.
So the question of nature in the city isn't just a question of the amount of greenery. It's more a question of having green spaces that are accessible to a much wider public.
Exactly. That's the real problem. And it's the reason why we got together to find an alternative place that belongs to the city of Milan. We found it here, on the Via Pepi, and we turned it into an allotments garden, which isn't just a green space, but a place for social and cultural exchange.
On what was once urban wasteland, there are now allotments where people can grow plants, flowers, and vegetables among the weeds. Open to everyone, the garden also welcomes local inhabitants and the children of the neighboring kindergarten, who can observe how nature changes with the seasons and learn the basics of urban gardening. It's wonderful here, with this wild garden. Ah, raspberries.
We're planning to expand over the neighbouring parking lot. We'll be like a virus, spreading throughout the city and changing everything. It's a very ambitious project.
This place is telling me that urban nature isn't just a question of green spaces, but of knowing how to share it and how to work it together. Despite its critics, the Bosco Verticale is still very innovative. These residential towers address both high-density problems and urban revegetation through habitat. The reforestation of towers seems to be one of the most fertile paths to follow in regenerating the city. But is such an architectural experiment possible elsewhere? Stefano Bori, the architect-designer of Bosco Verticale, is convinced it is.
In the future, in metropolises and cities, not only in Europe, but across the planet, we'll have to seriously take verticality into account. We can't continually keep clearing away nature and occupying farmland. We have to stop thinking that a city can endlessly laterally expand. We must think of a city growing within its existing boundaries. Basically, we're used to maintaining a relationship with trees and nature only in the suburbs and in the countryside. But we can have it in the city by growing vertically and providing 2 hectares of woodland in a tiny, little 1,500 square meters.
Today, the Bosco Verticale is an experiment put into practice. But do you think it could easily be reproduced in other cities?
Certainly. Firstly, because the technical research and development has been made available to everyone. And I think the Bosco Verticale could be used for social housing. It's what we're working on right now in China, for families with very low incomes.
The Bosco Verticale is a possible solution. But do you think there are other alternatives?
The main thing is to create a new relationship between nature, agriculture, and the city. Agriculture is cultivated nature, anthropomorphized nature. What we're doing here is more agriculture than nature. We've generated totally produced vegetation, planned, worked, and maintained. Nature and animal species need to be able to live without human intervention. The big challenge in the coming years will be to imagine an architecture and a city that are non-anthropocentric. We should no longer see mankind as the sole protagonist on the pedestal of life. It's an extraordinary challenge that we must pay attention to with great care and without hypocrisy.
Like all large cities in the world, Milan is at a crossroad. It could continue to grow and absorb all arable lands, or it can decide to establish a new relationship between the city and the natural world. The vegetal towers of the Bosco Verticale and the communal garden of Isola, Pepe Verde, are 2 possibilities, very different on paper, but not far apart in reality. For one thing is certain today, we can't go on living in anti-nature cities. It's crucial that we reintroduce nature into our cities so we can live in a healthier environment. rediscover the rhythm of the seasons, and become more aware of the fragility of our ecosystem, which has been harmed by modern urbanism. It's an essential aspect of our lives as city dwellers that is no longer possible to ignore. My name's Phillipe. I'm a philosopher, and I'm interested in what architecture can tell us about our lifestyles. I'll take you to explore some of the most remarkable habitats on the planet in order to discover their meaning and to share their riches. I'm in Papua, part of the Indonesian archipelago, at the heart of an impressive rainforest, crossed by a river on whose banks stand trees that reach 40 meters in height. This very isolated province in the southwest of West Papua is home to the Korowai, a Papuan people who live deep in the jungle. They are known as the Tree Men. It's a 3-day journey from Jayapura city to their clan. Airplane, canoe, then a day's walk through this swampy region. To adapt to this hostile environment, the Korowai have treated the forest not as an adversary, but as an ally worthy of their respect. There they found protection and a source of life. Totally unknown before 1975, their numbers are estimated at around 3,000, scattered in clans of 10 to 20 individuals. But even today, many of them have not been registered yet, as they are so difficult to locate. Deep in this jungle, rendered almost impenetrable by the lianas and many understory layers, I'm about to meet one of them, Marcus. Marcus!
Bonjour.
Hello.
Bonjour.
I'm happy to be here, finally.
I've been waiting for you, and you finally arrived. I'm glad. This is where I live.
Who lives here with you?
Just my family. My wife and my children. Come with me and I'll show you.
Thank you. It's impressive. Marcus seems to have no trouble moving along the tree trunks that cover the ground. Now I understand the origin of their name. Korowai means he who has strong legs. Marcus's clan lives in this clearing. It is composed of his family, his wife, his brother, his aunt, and several children. To them, the forest seems to be a second body that binds them all and that separates them from the rest of the world. But how do they live in isolation in such an inhospitable territory where resources are limited? How do they live in this huge forest? Among this cluster of homes, one very impressive dwelling is perched atop a tree. How do you climb up here? Can you show me?
I always use the little ladder, but you're big and strong. You need something more solid to climb.
I see. You only use your toes.
We climb like this when the houses are very high. You have to dig your toes in here. The elders used to do this, and we do the same.
Sure, but you have to be very agile.
I'm sure you could do it like me. But for safety's sake, I'd rather use the ladder I built for you. I'm used to it, you're not. I'm afraid you might fall.
Well, I don't want to fall either. It's a long way down.
You're very big, so I'm going to strengthen the ladder again and bind it very, very tightly.
Marcus, do you sing to give yourself strength when you work?
If I don't sing, I don't have any strength. Singing motivates me and gives me courage.
If you don't sing, my ladder won't be finished.
Don't worry, the chief has come to help me.
I'll try the steps. Not to the top because I'm too scared, but at least halfway to see if I can climb.
You can't go up like that. First, you must take off your shoes.
I was going to take off my shoes, but nothing else. I've done my best. Oh, the ladder wasn't completed? Thank you. When it comes to choosing the site or the various construction materials, Marcus takes advantage of the forest's diversity to make the best use of it. This treetop house, surrounded by huge trees, feels like a refuge. Luckily, you built the ladder for me, or I wouldn't be here. Thank you. It's incredible being here at this height. You really can see the whole forest.
That's what I like about living in a high house. The landscape is beautiful, and above all, there's lots of fresh air.
What height is the house built at?
I can't measure like you. I was told about meters, but I don't know what they are. I'd say around 10 times my size.
I'd say 10 to 15 meters. Yes, 15 meters. How do you choose the height at which to build your house?
You asked me, but I don't know. When I build, it's instinctive.
But why do the Korowai build high-altitude houses?
There are lots of reasons our houses are so high. Firstly, because the landscape is prettier from up above. But above all, it protects us from being attacked by animals. The house is also protected from the damp, because when it rains, the forest can be flooded. And finally, the house is lighter, and we can see very far.
Sure, you can see a long way. But what exactly are you looking for?
I can see enemies coming as well as evil spirits. If they come, I cut the ladder.
How is the house built?
The leaves you see up there are sago leaves. Those ties come from a plant called mangkok, and the wood is called bua.
This one. What's unsettling is, from up here, you can see the house moving, which isn't always very reassuring. But at the same time, you can feel it's very solid. Oh, you're right. It does move. I'm hanging on for dear life.
Don't worry, it's solid. It holds even if I move like this.
How many people can it take?
A new house like this one can take 20 to 25 people with no problems. It's solid, it won't collapse.
What surprises me here is that there are two fires.
One is for the men's space, another for the women's space.
So the men and the women don't occupy the same space in the house.
When men and women use the same fire, they argue. So now each has their own fire.
Marcus, we're sitting on the border between the men's space and the women's space. I hope things will go well. Where's the central tree that supports everything? Are we sitting on it now?
Here it is, underneath. Can you see?
Oh yes, I see it. It's here. We can see it. We're tearing off the floor here. Don't break everything. So here we see the trunk, and it's tied directly at the top of the tree. It's impressive. Very impressive.
This is the house's main foundation. The whole house is built around this trunk. It's attached very tightly so the house won't fall down. If it wasn't attached like this, it might collapse.
When you see the thickness of the trunk, you can see it's solid. All the wood is very dense, very hard. And there's an elaborate hanging system where everything is tied on very firmly. I've seen a lot of houses in my life, but this is the first time I've seen a house built in a tree like this, where such a technical know-how is at work.
I think I'd be as amazed as you if you showed me how you build your home. I think I'd be more than surprised.
The difference is, I don't know how to build my home. Someone did it for me.
Among the Korowai, if you don't build your own home, you're seen as lazy.
How do you make sure the house is balanced, because the main tree isn't in the center?
That's right. The central pillar wasn't enough, so right at the start, I planted this one and that one, and so on. If I hadn't, the house would have fallen down.
But how do you make sure it's stable?
When I was young, my father used to take me to build houses. He taught me that you need at least 3 poles for it to hold.
Marcus's eldest son has gone to seek a wife in the neighboring clan. Before he returns, as each time the clan grows in size, a new home must be built. This one is to be built in a tree in a clearing near that of Marcus. That's a magnificent tree. How did you choose it?
This tree would be perfect for a tree house because I can see that its wood is solid. With this tree, I wouldn't need any others to support the house. This can carry a whole house.
It's not just because it's solid. Others in the forest are solid.
There are lots of hardwood trees, but this one could continue to grow and become more solid.
Are you free to choose any tree in the forest to build a house?
This tree belongs to me. It stands on my land.
Do you know the limits of your land?
My land extends to the brook down there and to the other near the mountain.
Residing in a living tree involves a relationship with nature that is not driven by the will to dominate it, but by a desire to be attentive and to live according to its rhythm. With due respect, but with great efficiency, the Korowai take advantage of its constraints as its natural resources. Astonished, I watched the first phase of the construction of their home. After climbing up with unparalleled agility into the tree canopy, they prune all of the branches in order to lay the future floor of their home. In 5 days, it will be finished. I leave the men and join Marcus's wife, Gabrielle, in one of the clan's dwellings. You, the wife, and the children live in a lower house.
That's how it is traditionally. The women on the ground and the men up in the house. I stay down here to sleep with the children, my son Soni, Maoma, my daughter, and Moatan.
Is your home this house, this village, or the entire forest?
The whole forest is my home. Before I lived far away, towards the mountain. We had to leave the house because it was rotting. So we made a new house further away. That's how it is each time. When the house rots, we look for another tree to build another house. The forest has no limits. My husband wanted to find a tree here because his parents lived here, and I followed him. I'm mostly down here with the children. They're still small, and it's dangerous. Marcus stays up there.
I'm totally lost in this forest. I have no markers. How do you manage to orient yourself, to know which season it is?
The banana trees grow all year round. I plant them and watch them grow. They give me bananas almost all year round. In the dry season, I know there are turtles that come and lay their eggs in the sand down there. My parents always used to take me there when I was young. It's thanks to them that I know. I know that when the turtles lay, the red fruit season begins. That's how we know which season it is. For the rest, I watch nature every day to see if something has grown, something the children and I could eat.
I I understand how the Korowai habitat isn't only limited just to their dwellings, but merges with the surrounding territory. Here, nothing is really ritualized. Their home is just a shelter, and everything happens from day to day depending on their needs. This morning, I go with Marcus's family to cut a sago palm, the tree needed to build the new house. The bark will be used for the floor and the walls, and the leaves for the roof. What can I do?
I'll give you a machete and we could do it together.
Huh?
That's good.
Huh?
What do we cut, this?
No, you wait for me and I'll cut it down. You stay there and watch. And when the tree falls, run with me.
D'accord.
Okay, I'll run fast.
On enlève tout?
Do we take it all off?
That's it, it's okay.
Okay.
That's okay.
That's good.
What do we do now, Marcus?
Now we wait. It's the women's turn to work.
Not bad.
The men usually fell trees and strip the bark, and the women do the rest.
We finished. No part of this tree is wasted. The flesh of the sago palm, rich in protein, is vital to the survival of the Korowai. Their daily lives are structured around its harvest and preparation. The content of one tree is enough to feed 2 or 3 families for a whole week. What would happen if there were no more sago trees?
My parents told me that if there were no more sago trees, there'd be no more water or sun. It would be the end of the world.
For the last few years, the Indonesian government has been building new villages along the riverbanks to incite the Korowai to leave the forest. Many youngsters don't hesitate to leave their clan. Dalil, you're the clan chief, but how far does your clan extend? So far, I haven't met any other families.
There are fewer and fewer clans to watch nowadays because a lot of old people have died. And they were the ones who stayed in the forest. The young ones don't stay. They go off to other villages.
Why do so many youngsters leave the forest to settle in the city?
Once in the village, they discover new things. They discover electricity, and with it, electric lights. And after that, they don't want to come back.
In fact, when they go down to the village, Mabul, they taste rice, tea, coffee, and other flavours they'd never have known in the forest. Then they go further and further away in search of noise and light.
They taste all that, it's true, but they also learn to dress and come into contact with outsiders who want to come and see the village. And what the two old guys omitted to tell you is that they also taste women. So why would they come back? There are no girls in the forest.
When it comes to leaving the Korowai, I realize how much my encounter with Marcus has transformed me, full of joy and astonishment. For a time, I shared the life of a man who was born, has been living, and will no doubt die in his forest. I find his determination to stay there both troubling and reassuring, as it shows that his home, well beyond any treetop constructions, is the whole forest, a limitless home that cannot be known in just one lifetime.